Started. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We will kick off our meeting. Do we have, we're going to start with our community agreements today. So we have a couple that we chose for the content of our meeting today. So the first one is actively create a safe space to give and receive feedback to the speaker and the listener. And then the second one is know when to take space and know when to make space to ensure all voices are heard. So we'll be keeping those two in our minds today when we move forward with our agenda. Do we have any public comments today?
We don't today.
Okay. All right, so we could jump right into approving the meeting minutes. And I know Bruce had sent in some corrections, and I think you've already gotten those, Priscilla.
Yes, thank you for those, Bruce.
Yeah.
And I've incorporated those changes.
So we'd be approving them with those changes that
Yes.
Bruce shared. Great. Do we have a motion to approve minutes from February?
I'll motion to approve minutes from February.
Second. Okay, all in favor? And any opposed? And abstention? Okay, so we had Commissioner Bechtold abstain because she was not there. So great. Thanks, everybody. All right, we could move on to the City Foresters report. So a little ahead of schedule. Yeah.
Okay, I have for y'all today in my report 8 items. First, Commissioner Vandemark made her last meeting. So I wanted to, in spite of that, in absentia, I wanted to take some space to thank her for her 8 years of service on the commission. Specifically, I think her focus on policies affecting trees in the city was particularly remarkable and beneficial. Also that Commissioner Vandemark often brought equity considerations to the fore, whose voices were being heard, whose were not being heard, what impacts would be on what communities, what was being considered or not considered, which is incredibly important and valuable. And I also appreciated her welcoming new commissioners. So thank you, Commissioner Vandemark, for your service. Second item, it was wet, very, very wet recently. So I wanted to give you the report out on the city's tree emergency response service for that time. Urban Forestry responded to 68 requests for emergency service between 7 a.m. on Wednesday, March 11th and the morning of March 15th, Sunday. All but a couple with complexities like power lines were cleared by Urban Forestry the same day. The team worked as always 24/7, and the response included nearly all of the total 23 Urban Forestry arborists and the 5 arborist trainees that comprises our entire operations team on the ground. As always, Urban Forestry worked in close coordination with other emergency responders, for example, PBOT, PGE. The team incurred no injuries, which is remarkable and something we're always looking for. And there was one major equipment issue which the team resolved the same day. So congratulations to them for their great work, their communications, their skills, their equipment care, and the teamwork that they use. Given the volume of the emergencies and that these folks, and this is one relatively small event, really, when we think over time of all the weather impacts on trees that we've seen in Portland. These are the same folks who are doing the heritage tree care for those that are on public properties, proactive park tree maintenance. So this is in addition to their regular duties. And again, that's a team of including the trainees who can't do all those things. 28 staff. It's relatively small for our forest and our city. Third item is an update on the city's economic opportunity analysis. Y'all had a briefing on this a few meetings ago. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on the EOA on January 13th. They will hold several work sessions over the next few months before submitting a recommended version of the economic opportunities analysis to City Council. Fourth item, this is also an update on something you all were briefed on and contributed to before, Columbia Corridor and Industrial Lands Environmental Overlay Project. This project is moving in tandem with the economic opportunities analysis. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on that in early January and will also hold multiple work sessions on it over the next few months. And that plan will be submitted with the EOA to council sometime later this year. Fifth item is about regulatory improvement that we initiated. Urban Forestry and PP&D tree permitting team partnered to revise administrative regulations on attaching ornamental lighting to city and street trees. Since 2008, there's been an ordinance for ornamental lighting attachments to trees, which included some highly prescriptive and oftentimes burdensome requirements. So we identified those issues. They've become more apparent in the last few years as the city's expanded use of lighting to improve public safety, create placemaking and activation projects in the central city. You can see those types of lights all around in park and street trees downtown here. At Urban Forestry and PP&D's recommendation, DCA, Deputy City Administrator Priya Dhanapal, rescinded the 2008 regulation and approved a new administrative rule, PRK 2.08, which aligns with current Title 11 requirements, and the change is anticipated to reduce regulatory burden for hanging lighting while still ensuring public safety and tree protection and care. Thanks to Brian Lando for leading that work. In case you didn't hear, the Tree Summit is fast approaching. That will be April 11th, Saturday, from 9 a.m. to noon at the Mount Scott Community Center. I'll put, after my report, a link in the chat for the information on the Tree Summit. It could be a great opportunity for you commissioners to connect with others and learn some things about trees in the city, share some things. Space is limited. Registration is required, please, so we can make sure we have the space we need and aren't exceeding that. Content will include community partners attending, Friends of Trees will be there, Portland Fruit Tree Project, Trees for Life Oregon, Oregon Department of Forestry's Urban and Community Forestry Program, also the Shade Equity Coalition will be there participating. Kind of a tree party. Good morning, Josue.
Morning.
Urban Forestry's hosted tree summits events every year since 2011 with a brief pandemic break. It was originally an outgrowth of the Tree Inventory Project and has evolved to become a space for neighbors and partners to connect, learn, strengthen wider efforts to grow, care for, and protect our urban canopy together. Okay, just two more items. This one is an update on the budget development process for next fiscal year 26-27, which begins July 1st. Today, the Public Works Service Area led by our Deputy City Administrator, Donna Paul, is presenting to City Council on how the service area approached meeting the cut targets and general overview of what's been submitted for the mayor's consideration. As you know, the city is facing a significant revenue shortfall. Consequently, and as you also know from previous meetings, like other divisions in parks, Urban Forestry submitted reduction scenarios for up to 10% of general fund and PSEF funds that council swapped for general funds in the urban forestry budget. This level of reductions would require significant reduction in existing services if those are taken. Supervisors have made team members whose positions may be eliminated aware of that. As I mentioned last time, that's a really important step that we all try to do as early in the process before things become public in detail as we can. In addition, and as you also know, the city is simultaneously engaging in the core services realignment. You've heard about that in past meetings. As proposed, this will also impact urban forestry and the city's tree program significantly with additional staff and service reductions. In the coming weeks, supervisors will be having conversations with staff whose positions may be limited through that process. There will also possibly be additional people impacts, such as when labor contract seniority requirements are applied. The city leads determining those types of impacts. It's a large body of work, and that doesn't occur until the decisions have been made, so that'll be in the coming months. So the next step in the budget development process for this city is the mayor's budget, as I mentioned before. That is scheduled to come out on the 20th of April and will be followed by council work sessions, and ultimately, of course, council will decide the budget for next year. My last item, we have today Josue and Tony back with us, so I wanted to speak a little bit to planting season and establishment season, and warm us up for that agenda item today. So spring starts, of course, planting season is ending. Most of our planting is done. We're starting to shift into establishment season. Might be a hot one this summer, so that will be especially important. We've heard lots of excitement from residents and neighbors about all the new trees they see, particularly in the low canopy and low income neighborhoods, our priority neighborhoods where the bulk of our planting is focused. That's been really great to hear that feedback, that people are excited to see trees getting added. I want to note that thanks to funding, including PSEF's Equitable Tree Canopy Fund and our skilled, dedicated, and resourceful urban forestry team, our planting programs are highly successful. This is work to be proud of, and it's much improved from where city tree planting was just a handful of years ago. So many thanks and all kudos to the team. And I encourage you again to use the time to ask questions and discuss with Tony and Josue. That concludes my report. Anyone has any questions? Yes.
Question.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Chairs.
Yeah. Going back to budget and the potential of elimination of positions, is that is there anyone in urban forestry that's otherwise like exempt as far as like critical services, such as the teams that are like the arborists that you mentioned that did all the storm work, or like other of those like kind of general maintenance teams? Are those, is everyone essentially included, or is there?
Yeah, good question. No one is exempt. As you heard from Amanda Manatas and Claudio Campuzano, Parks and Rec developed a process to try to prioritize more core or essential services to insulate them more from reductions. And we in urban forestry did that as well. The fact is, though, that we are a small program, and general fund and PSEF swap for general fund is throughout our program. Yeah, so nothing is really unique.
The emergency work, is that charged to PBOT or is that on urban forestry budget?
Oh, that's a great question. It used to be charged, it used to be urban forestry's budget some years ago, where it's street tree related. So some of those 68 calls were street trees, some were park or other city property trees, police station, fire station, those sorts of things. So yes, they were, with the PSEF funding under tree protection care and workforce development, which includes a few things, street tree maintenance development and piloting among them. We shifted that funding to help PBOT out to the PSEF funds. As an appropriate use of the funds, gave PBOT another $800,000 or so each fiscal year back to do all the things we need them to do. Yeah. Welcome.
On the lighting on trees, so who is checking to make sure that's not girdling the trees?
Also a good question that I would expect from this commission. Permits are required for those lights to be installed on city-owned or managed trees, so street trees and city property trees. And that is a process that Portland Permitting and Development Tree Permitting Team now does. It used to be ours, but of course that moved. They continue to do that. The administrative rule change does not affect that at all. So it's their role to ensure that code and arboricultural standards according to code are met.
So are the lights permitted annually and inspected annually, or there's an? Yeah,
Yes, typically that is a standard requirement that they have to be re-inspected and often removed annually and reinstalled. I will say because of staffing levels, prior to all of that moving to PP&D, we had also started requiring arborist reports and arborist assurance of what the installation would be, so that that would all get done by the applicant, the city, on the front end to make it lighter on our tree inspectors.
so if a member of the public sees lighting that appears to be damaging trees, what should they do?
Like all tree concerns, 503-823 tree addresses, specific addresses, and as much information as possible is helpful. Or there's the email option. It's not an emergency in this case, unless it is, trees@portlandoregon.gov.
Thank you.
That would be handled, Commissioner Nelson, like any other code compliance situation.
So talk about the piece of budget swap. You've kind of used that term. I mean, I know you've explained this before, but it gets a little confusing.
Yes, it does.
I realize it can backfill general funds, but does it protect urban forestry because of the grants they have, at least to some degree, more than other areas, or? Yeah.
Good question. The swap funds are, as I recall, $7 million a year. That was done for this fiscal year, so last year's budget development process. And it is treated by the city the same as general fund. And so when 10% of the general fund budget was assigned as the kind of worst case scenario of reductions, those funds were included. So in effect, it made the amount of reduction that our division had to come up with higher. There you go. And we've also learned from the core services realignment project, since you were asking about PSEF funds and how they're affected, that the source of the funding is not part of the consideration. So whether it's PSEF or general fund or anything else, grants, those sorts of things, is not part of their current process of identifying positions for potential elimination.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, let me just follow up on that, if that's okay. So it's just a little curious, because usually, you know, for example, if you have federal grants or other types of things, you have signed a contract committing to specific work. And so, you know, usually there's some sort of protection around that. Is that not considered the case with PSEF, or?
What we have been told by the core services realignment project is that the funding source does not matter. We do know that concern has been raised about that in various places, including, I believe, at council, as well as our colleagues in PSEF and by us as well.
So another topic, so the economic opportunities analysis and that whole, the watershed work and so forth. Do you expect as that evolves to have kind of evolving opportunities for trees? So that we should make sure we hear about it again before it goes to council, or what, you know, where do you think that's at?
Yeah, great question. I think I have an answer, but if Brian is here, yay!
Yes.
What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I think there will be additional opportunity for comment. So where that's at right now is It is with the Planning Commission, and they held a public hearing last month, and they'll have a series of work sessions at their meetings. It's a really dense project, and so they'll take a few months to that. When they have their proposed recommendation that goes to City Council, that would be additional opportunity for the commission to review, be briefed on the recommended draft, and then submit comment to City Council as well. So that would be, it is something to continue to track. We'll keep you updated, and there'll be additional opportunities to comment.
No other questions? Commissioners, we can move on to discussing planting and contracts.
So thank you again to Tony and Josue for coming back. And as I recall, you have kind of a very brief recap to set the tone so that the council commission can ask questions and then be discussion about the programs.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks for having us back. I think that there is like a overview slide that might be available. I can't really see it, but that's okay. Yeah, I wanted to, just one moment. I'm going to open it up on my end. I was anticipating being able to see it. Sorry
Oh,
about
I
that.
can, Tony, I have it. If you just give me a second.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Excellent. So, Josue, do you want to go first?
Yes, I can start, Tony. Thank you.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you all for having me again. I'm here to answer questions. Yeah, just a little bit, just of a recap. Over the past 2 years, we've done a lot of work with getting contractors on board. We went from having 5 contractors to do our planting work to expanding the scope and services that we provide to Portlanders with the contractors that we do hire. And we went to 17 contractors, right, that are doing different types of work. And we are providing training opportunities for these contractors. And at the same time, we're also providing opportunities for our staff, our team, to strengthen their skills managing contractors at the same time. So we are offering both opportunities on both ends. And yeah, we have 2 big solicitations coming up here that should be released in the next few weeks or months. That where we're also anticipating to onboard a couple more contractors to do more planting and establishment work, but also grow contracts, which is something that is totally new to us, to our team. But we're also looking to establish those grow contracts with nurseries to provide tree stock, as Tony mentioned at the last meeting. But yeah, overall, we have new exciting opportunities, and yeah, that's all I have. I don't know if you want to do questions now, Tony, or you want to go over your slide as well.
I'm open to whatever the commission would like.
And I wanted to add something to Josue's great summary before y'all decide how you want to do it. And that is that the contractor development, outreach, onboarding, expansion that Josue has been leading is also contracting for private property tree care and street tree maintenance. Obviously, equitable tree canopy planting, as you know, started earlier, so it's focused on that now. But rather than spend more money and like reproduce different types of contractor development, it's really all Josue and his colleagues who will lead that for the street tree maintenance contractors, for example. We have some of them on board right now off of existing city-wide arborist services. But because the work is different, we will need to develop more contracts that will also be part of that service. And then I wanted to also mention that this type of community benefit from PSEP funds and development of a contractor community that is really strong about tree practices and doing this work instead of city staff doing it, doing all of it. There's a lot that city staff does, don't mistake me. That is also a specific part of the PSEP funding goals that's being met here. Okay. How would you like them to proceed?
Like Commissioner Sanchez had a comment.
Comment question, regarding the grow contracts. As far as the way you guys are reaching out, are you just sending it out to like the ether for everyone to kind of reach out to be part of the grow contract, or are you targeting like nurseryguide.com or one of those types of places? Is there also like a experience base as far as like, you know, the large nurseries like J. Frank Schmidt that, you know, could probably produce majority of the trees? But are you trying to find like nurseries that are smaller and upcoming, or just kind of across the spectrum?
That's a great question. So with this Grow Contracts project, I'm working with Maria Viles. She's a procurement coordinator with her in Forestry, if that is her title. Tony, correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, she has done great work conducting outreach with the different nurseries all over. Well, I would say even nationwide, but she is focusing on the West Coast. But yeah, she is focusing on bringing large nurseries in the area. But at the same time, we understand that we also want to work with local and upcoming nurseries also in the area. So we're doing a little bit of both. We do have we have created different sets of lists of who we're outreaching to, and as you mentioned, we are including the large nurseries, medium-sized and smaller nurseries. We have done, and are continuing to do nursery visits. So we've gone to Hillsborough later next week. We are going down to Salem. But yeah, we are conducting different nursery visits. But I think our ultimate goal is to hire or to contract with approximately 4 to 6 nurseries from different sizes. But we do understand our projects that this procurement are large, right? So we do understand that we do need to hire or contract with large companies, right? But yeah, we are open to seeing. We also need to wait and see the bids that we receive and from whom we receive those. So we are conducting that outreach. We are focused on the large contractors, but we also do need to see who is interested in our work and who ends up submitting a solicitation for that work.
One follow-up question. You mentioned nationwide. Are you intending to solicit growers from outside of the West Coast or outside of, like, general speaking? I mean, especially if you're trying to visit nurseries, you know, I imagine going up to Vancouver is not a big deal, but going up to, you know, Bellingham might be more of an operation or those types of things. Is that something that the city is looking at doing, is really expanding that?
Right. Yeah, I should clarify. So as I mentioned, we are focused on like the West Coast here, so we can do those like tree taggings and we can visit these nurseries. But when I should say when I meant like nationwide, we are looking at those contracts all over the states to see what pieces we like from those contracts and use on our own. So yeah, actually,
He's got his hand up.
yeah, I was gonna pass it on to Tony.
Yeah, so Hostway is absolutely correct. The nationwide component, just to clarify really quick, we have partnered with New York City Parks. They have a very robust grow contract in place. They've been doing grow contracts for over a decade. They get their nurseries that they partner with, they get a lot of liner from J.F. Schmidt, as you could imagine, and others. And they are very interested in collaborating with us, not to be part of our grow contract, but to be almost like a technical advisor where they are assisting us with our specifications because they know that like um, as robust as our specifications, that that will benefit them as well. So that's kind of the clarification there. And then also that Mari, who is our tree procurement coordinator, some of those organizations she's reached out to, she reaches out and is plugged into the Oregon Association of Nurseries and Washington State Nursery and Landscape Association, in addition to just reaching out to as many nurseries that we've already partnered with through our planting contractors.
And part of this whole publicizing the opportunity as we're developing it included in early February, the team hosted an information session. And that just on what was happening and how they might be interested in being involved or not, and the schedule ahead. And that drew more than 26 attendees from different nurseries and industry leaders. So there's robust interest.
I wanted an explanation of, are any of the programs dealing with trees on private property? And if they are, what are the specifications for identifying where those trees go on that private property?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are planting on private property and doing a big level of growth this year. Yep, as you can see, we're already planning for that FY27. So even though we're planting where it says we're here, we're always planning at least a year ahead. So we have, we're in the midst of creating our own internal guidelines for planting on private property. It'll be influenced by like learning landscapes, planting on schoolyards. Really, it comes down to coordinating with the property owner. So our team will go out and base a site plan off of those initial conversations with the property owner. Those site plans will be reviewed internally and then also reviewed by the property owner for sign off because these are opt-in programs. And then from there, we will move forward with planting. And so those conditions, we've partnered with other bureaus to make sure that even on private property, we're planting trees appropriate distance from infrastructure like street lights, any traffic lights. But then once we've adhered to those, then we have a bit more flexibility on private property as opposed to, say, the right of way. We still will be planting appropriate sized trees. Say there's an alleyway and there's high voltage wires, or some of these more unique situations. Our goals on private property are still that we are going to plant at least 75% of those trees will be large, native, or evergreen, and then the other 25% will be medium-sized trees. So really the only small trees that we plant on private property will be small natives or small evergreen trees. And that will just be a small slice of that larger 75%.
A follow-up question is, will some of that work be contracted out, and will there be specifications for the contractors as to where trees may and may not go on private property?
Yes, absolutely. So we're using our tree plotter, kind of like a GIS system, to plot the exact point where the trees will be planted. And then, as we know, that's, it can be a little inaccurate based on aerial photography. Each point has a spacing description on it. So it will be X amount of feet from, oftentimes we'll do from the water meter or some other permanent structure. We also put in those white flags in the lawn, and depending on the property and if it's raining or not, we'll also use some spray paint. But yeah, it's the exact location that we have surveyed and received sign off from the property owner.
Is that done by urban forestry staff or is it done by the contractor staff?
It is done by urban forestry staff. The only exception is our contract with Friends of Trees. That's all managed by Friends of Trees through their contract. But every other planting with non-Friends of Trees contractors, it is urban forestry staff.
In the contract with Friends of Trees, have you given them specific oversight as to what are acceptable sites on private property?
They have a bit more flexibility. We do have some guidelines in the contract. I would need to pull that up to give you more specifics, but it's more aligned with their current practices, how they go about citing those trees. We do give them the requirement on that same 75% large native evergreen, but for the exact like location of the trees, that is more on Friends of Trees staff to find those sites in partnership with the property owner.
I would strongly urge you to get very specific with Friends of Trees and hold them to the same standards that you hold subcontractors to.
Definitely. Yeah. And so just really quick, like the 10 feet from buildings, those considerations, how that impacts like Title 11 removals. Yeah, those are definitely considerations that we've built in across everything and Friends of Trees is aware of.
Okay. If I have more concerns about that, should I talk to you or Josue?
Yeah, I would probably be the best person.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Tony.
Totally.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the comment, Commissioner Nelson.
Few questions. To follow up to the private property question. So what is the overall vision for private property? I mean, I understand schools and that kind of thing, but it sounds like you're doing some pilots, and what would those be and what would the rollout look like?
I think
Yeah,
I can start speaking to that, Tony, and then you might fill in the blanks. Mine, of course, would be a higher, broader level. Most of the city's forest by far is on private property, and most of the opportunity to increase the forest is on private property, which if you sit back and think about it, kind of makes sense because rights of way are kind of the hardest place in a city to be a tree. And there are a lot of city-owned parks and natural areas and things like that in the city, but those don't come along, new ones often. And they still aren't that many. So context we put it in, one of the goals is, of course, these are private properties. So the folks who own them, they decide what goes there, but we are trying to encourage canopy expansion, also retention in those places where the property owners are amenable. Part of that is our community stewardship programs, trying to educate folks about the services of trees that we all need in the city and how they might want to have trees, and then giving them the free service. And part of that is also the new PSEF funded pilot for private property tree care, because we know very well from our years of work in the city that cost of maintenance is a real concern for property owners. The planting and establishment is a few $1,000s at most, which can be a very significant obstacle for folks. They don't want that, but they feel weight of years of high costs, which we're also working on messaging that, because really a well-established tree that was planted correctly and in the right place and of good stock, which is what we do, doesn't need a lot of expensive maintenance in general. It's when it's a big tree that needs to be removed decades later that we're talking thousands of dollars. And that's really what people are concerned about. But that's an aside. So that's part of the picture too. It's kind of trying to be full service and full perspective. At the same time, we're still working on improving space and planting and retention in rights of way, as well as city owned and managed properties. So we're trying to address all of them at once to maximize the opportunity. And given limited resources, we're always thinking about how to do the most we can, have maximize the resources and opportunities as quickly as we can as well. It's one of the reasons we focus on the high service types of trees. Evergreen, native, large form. We know we get more return out of it. So that was long. Tony, do you have anything to add?
That was great. I'm glad you provided that broader explanation. Yeah, so to achieve that, we are rolling out this fall more plantings on industrial commercial sites, and those locations have been identified in alignment with the urban forest plan to be along the river corridors. And a lot of those neighborhoods are in our priority service areas. So outreach will be going like mailing and reaching out to those property owners. Will be happening in the next couple of months. We're shooting for end of April to start getting folks signing up, and we can go out and survey and sign participant agreements. So that's like our main one that is like new for this fall. And then really continuing those front yard trees, expanding more into multifamily properties like large apartment complexes. And of course, with a strong focus in those priority service areas, which include East and North Portland.
So thank you, Tony, and I'll add why those areas, like why commercial industrial and why multifamily. Commercial industrial areas typically, not just in Portland, but elsewhere, have very low canopy. They also have high need for tree services. You think about what happens in those areas, they're often hardscaped and trees and those types of considerations. And people, of course, work there every day and live there or nearby. Those are often in Portland near our rivers as well. So another reason that they're an area of focus. And then for multifamily situations, renters have the same needs. And we've found that planting and maintaining trees is not always the property owner's highest priority. So we're trying to really we're looking for the gaps, have been looking for the gaps and are filling those gaps.
A couple of questions. Every once in a while I've run into planting strips that have gas lines in them. What is the current plan? I've heard kind of just like some off the cuff remarks of, oh, there's going to be some effort at some point. Is there any current plan for, planting strips that are, 6 to 8 feet wide and nothing can technically go in them because there's a gas line running right through the middle? Is there any plan of doing, street relocations, or that's quite an endeavor? I'm not doubting that, but is that something that's a process at the moment?
Yeah, good question also. Tony, do you have a response?
Yeah, and I also want to acknowledge that we received some questions ahead of time, and this was one of the questions. So I definitely don't want to skip those questions that were sent ahead of time. So whenever I can definitely get to those. So love the gas question. This, in all honesty, gas lines and our team, it's a struggle. And we wish that it was a different landscape out there. So yes, we are trying to find a solution to this. And so a colleague in urban forestry is figuring out what flexibility we might have, and if there's some flexibility depending on if the line is pressured or not. So still awaiting guidance from that. Our current practice is that we maintain 5 feet. So that's if the line is parallel to the street in the right of way, say it's a large planting strip, it's difficult depending on where that line is. If it's right down the middle, we don't plant because we want to put those large trees in those spaces right in the middle of the strip. So we note that in our database that the conflict is gas line, and we know that notation is tells us that that's the only conflict. there's a secondary conflict, we note that because we want to know how many spaces are out there that if we are granted more flexibility, we can go back to those sites and plant. So we don't write them off completely. They are kind of in a holding pattern until we get more guidance. But yeah, right now we follow the same standards that we require the public to follow. Yeah, so it's that 5 feet right now.
Oh, more or less a follow-up recommendation. I was the one that sent that question off originally.
Great.
So, you know, I specifically do have my neighbor across the street. They have an empty planting strip with a gas line, and it's something I think about pretty often because I'm like, it'd be really cool to get street trees, but you can't. Are you looking at like a secondary evaluation into these properties that do have basically unusable planting strips now, and then looking into recommending doing front yard plantings at that same time? I mean, likely it's something that's already being evaluated as a front yard planting, but kind of maybe saying, oh, you normally would recommend one tree, but there could be 3 or 4 trees in this yard. So that's something that's being done as kind of like a way to catch up for something that could have otherwise canopy loss. Not loss, but you know,
Miss.
I like that.
Yeah. I love the level of these questions. All of them have been so good. Yes, that is part of our other program where we are planting in front yards. This is we haven't been doing it very long. So this year, that program is focused on the priority service areas, which are the areas that our free street tree program came through that opt-out model. And so this program is offering right-of-way trees and front yard trees. It's not opt-out, this is opt-in. So if a property owner says that, yep, I would love some trees, and the property owner might not know like what is the right of way or not, that's fine. We will connect with them and then do that site assessment. And then in that exact scenario, because we call out utilities ahead of time, that conversation would happen where unfortunately the gas line is through your right of way. We can't plant within 5 feet of it. However, our program offers front yard trees, and this is the opportunity for your property. So yeah, we do provide that. And so we are in effect like going back to those properties that were in those priority service areas.
Thank you.
And for those spots, is it like, can you plant a shrub? Like what is kind of, is it just trees that aren't allowed? Just
Do you know the answer to that, Tony?
I don't know that answer.
Yeah.
That's just an interesting thought because some of our native shrubs are almost tree sized because they can get pretty big. And also they do provide a lot of habitat. And I mean, they're not going to provide the cooling benefit of the tree, of course, but you know, it would still could potentially benefit the neighborhood. So and I see Brian, I don't know.
Yeah, and I'll hang, I see you, Brian, too. So there aren't any permit requirements around things that are not trees, shrubs, irises, whatever, for the planting strip. However, there are requirements around safety. And so a challenge with shrubs, because yes, shrubs do something, nothing near what trees do in terms of the services, the volume, and the longevity in a lot of cases. But a challenge with shrubs is visibility, line of sight for drivers. And that is something that the Bureau of Transportation must monitor and manage closely. I'm going to guess that Bureau of Transportation might want to have permit requirements for not tree plantings in rights of way because of some of the issues that come up, even just blocking stop signs, for example. But that's a whole nother level of work that I am suspecting is not their highest priority. Brian, do you have any adds to that?
Yeah,
Corrections?
I was just gonna say that there are no regulations on planting shrubs. They can be planted. PBOT does have requirements around what can be placed in the right of way. Things like where like guarded boxes or other things other than trees that can go into the right of way in the planting strip. But yeah, as long as they're not posing potential hazards for visibility or anything like that, shrubs are totally fine. Yep.
I would like to also add to a response on Commissioner Sanchez's question about street realignment. Realignment is extremely expensive and takes years. And so those are really significant capital investment projects that PBOT, as our streets manager, is responsible for doing. And it seems that that only happens when there's really significant design issues, or usually around public safety. For example, there was a big redesign project for Martin Luther King Avenue on the inner east side that was really safety focused. Where there are opportunities when those projects are happening, that urban forestry or PP&D tree permitting can engage in, we consistently try to maximize improvements for more tree space going forward. There is an inherent conflict in right of way between built infrastructure. The built infrastructure alone has conflicts, and then the tree part too. So it's constant. It is one of the biggest limiting factors, if not the biggest limiting factor for street trees. So it continues to be something we work on. And I wanted to give you an example of how we're working on that. Always looking for opportunities and trying to staff the whole, like, we could work with whatever other bureau on getting them to move things this way consistently, and we have more tree space. 82nd Avenue redevelopment project, which I believe is also at least in part PSEF funded. Tree inspector Jason Tate was closely involved with that, as well as Belinda Udelman and Brian Lando. Linda and Brian, as you know, are kind of our strategy policy team. And kind of tree by tree went through with the other infrastructure bureaus, maximizing tree planting space for the median that will be in parts of 82nd Avenue. And if you can't envision 82nd Avenue, I'll describe it this way. A very wide expanse of hardscape with curb tight sidewalks, no shade, lots of traffic, lots of folks having to walk in that area. Safety is a huge consideration. That was an impetus for the 82nd Avenue redevelopment project. And thanks to our involvement and the expertise of our team and the tree inspector and working together, we're comfortable saying we really did maximize the tree opportunities there, and there is good space for trees. We're hoping that and other situations that we've been able to be closely involved in will serve as models for us to establish different policies with the other infrastructure bureaus that'll expand our street tree capacity.
That area around McDaniel High School is awesome.
Yeah.
It's really made a huge difference.
Isn't that amazing? Just think about when they're big.
Yeah, I live in Madison South.
Yeah.
like, Not too far from my walk. I've been making a point to walk at 82nd. It's really, the diversity is really, really great.
And just thinking about the high school students who walk there, like, it's so much amazing.
Well, thank you, Brian, because I know he's here, and Belinda and
Can I ask
Jason.
like one quick question? Going back to the shrub comment, and I don't want to divert too much, but technically a tree is a single stem. What do you plant that reaches a tree height of 16 feet?
Depending on where you look, but yeah.
Could you plant a multi-stem crepe myrtle on a planting strip without a permit?
I think we have lists in the
Yeah.
city of what is a tree and what is not.
But referred to like an age. What would be a shrub in a gas line area?
That's part of why I asked that question,
You
because
know,
it's a little bit like
Very gray.
arbitrary.
But Tony,
Maybe touch back.
I hear folks looking to find a way. What are your thoughts, Tony or Brian?
Planting strip was full, just saying.
Yeah.
Don't ask, don't tell.
I would say until we get some kind of definitive answer, I always want to stay optimistic and see if we could get some more flexibility and then open up those spaces for large trees for, just maximizing all those benefits. And I think that's my take on it.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you're saying.
I get those questions.
Are popular. It is we were talking before about maximizing our resources and the opportunities, right? We really are focused on that. And to date, we have not dealt with small trees. Folks can always do that on their own because we know that the services they provide are far less than large form trees and they are shorter lived. And in a lot of cases where we've seen efforts to just put trees everywhere, including in that little space, and it's a little tree, it is really a burden for the adjacent property owner because they are supposed to maintain the clearance over the sidewalk and for line of sight. And these are trees that are inherently in that height level. That's a problem, especially if you're driving a large vehicle, which are some of the most safety concerning on our streets, and they're gonna die sooner. So our perspective sometimes on that is it's kind of not worth doing that. We would rather invest in getting the policy or design changes that could really create strong, enduring tree opportunities, like 82nd Avenue. We could have been instead of staffing 82nd Avenue, we could have focused on planting in small strips in parts of the city that don't have enough canopy and don't have street trees planting space. We thought it would be better investment to work on things like 82nd, excuse me.
Good question. So, I see that the graph is kind of through 28, which, but I also know our goals for canopy overall and how many years it will take and so forth. What do you anticipate as kind of the pressure in terms of running out of appropriate spaces and therefore, thinking ahead, I mean, private property, commercial in particular, etc. So how are you thinking about that?
Yeah.
And therefore, that might change the marketing somewhat or the focus or pilots that you do and that type of thing.
That is a great question. I will start and then I'm going to guess that Tony or Brian or others may have other things to add, but we are starting with the highest service areas that are the lowest cost to plant a tree. So for example, the existing 8-foot planting strip where the adjacent property owner is okay with us coming along planting a street tree. Bingo, that's a top of our list. We know that we are already actually running out of those. Sometimes it's just because folks opt out of the street tree planting. And for those, someday we will come back because the owner may have changed. So we will be shifting into lower priority areas of the city to continue planting. Right now, we're very focused in the highest priority areas. And we're also working on projects at the same time to create more space. So I'll use 82nd as an example, working on policy parts, but also remember trees in the curb zone, right? Which is the first of potentially many design approaches that will significantly increase space for street trees. And we're always reassessing. At core for urban forestry services are collecting accurate data and information and doing analyses so that we can understand how things are going and where we focus next. And that is in part why you heard from Tony about industrial and commercial area planting, because that's where we know. So it's dynamic and keeps going. We continue to focus on highest service and maximizing the limited resources we have. And I wanted to add to that before Tony or Brian jump in, that ends in 2008 because PSEF funds are on 5-year plans. Equitable tree canopy is this funding, and you'll see it's not all equitable tree canopy. A significant part is also general fund and tree planting and protection and preservation fund. Remember that one? The expectation that we and PSEP have is that the funding will be renewed ongoing. Also for private property tree care, also for street tree maintenance. That is a decision that resides with City Council ultimately. Now, anyone else, Tony or Brian, want to respond to co-chair's question about that?
Yeah, I appreciate what you said, Jen. That aligns with my initial response. I want to really highlight the point that Jen had mentioned around reevaluating our programs. Every year we have a very robust planning process. We're actually at the tail end of that for FY27. And a big component of that is reassessing how is our outreach looking, what is our outreach plan, and building in contingency plans. But in addition to that, always looking forward to what opportunities there are, like the ones that Jen had mentioned. So there's still a lot of opportunity out there, and we are still referring back to our 2018 planting strategy, which was a massive community led effort to get um, community direction and feedback on how to plant, um, who will benefit the most from our limited resources. And so, really opening up those opportunities for renters, industrial locations. These are areas that we just really haven't been as active as we will. So, yes, we have a lot of like within our planning process, thinking about a year ahead, but also in the next 3 years, next 5 years. And so far, that planning process has been very successful. I'm not saying it's perfect. We're constantly reevaluating to figure out, ooh, that was a question we didn't ask ourselves. This was something we ran into. But it is very intentional in our project management timeline that we have that planning. I sometimes tell my staff that it's like watching a cooking show. They pull out that perfectly cooked whatever from the oven. The host, wasn't in that studio kitchen preparing it. It was all the planning ahead of time, and that tree planting the day of, that's exciting. The implementation is wonderful. We love it. But that planning process is just so robust in our program. And it is looking at, okay, what in our foundational documents, including the urban forest plan, are opportunities for this program?
Y'all, just noting for time, we're now running a couple minutes behind, so any last questions or thoughts before we move on to the next?
Tony had mentioned that some folks had submitted questions. Were those all covered, Tony?
Not directly. So, is it okay if I go over those last two questions real quick?
They were probably both mine. I mean,
I think
You still have them.
interest
They-
of time,
they are
I'd say let's
brief.
keep going.
Okay,
There-
I can respond in email if that's okay.
Yeah, that
That's
sounds great.
Okay, thank you for submitting those.
Thank you.
Tony? All
Great,
right,
thanks for this work. It's
Yeah.
really spectacular. So.
it was nice that we had a few extra minutes to talk more about that, because we had a lot of questions, so thanks you all for all the work you're doing. It's exciting, and we're looking forward to continuing to hear updates periodically on all of those projects. We're gonna jump to heritage tree property owner deeds. Sam is here for that.
Who's Sam?
Wonderful. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everybody. You co-chairs and commissioners, thanks for having me back. For those who are curious, my name is Sam Wolf. I'm a botanic specialist in urban forestry, and I'm also the heritage tree program. So I was wanting to come back and give you an update on my progress. My current project right now is reconciling county records that document private heritage trees. And give you an update on that. And also I have forwarded a proposed criteria for delisting of private heritage trees. So just a quick recap background. The issue is most private heritage trees do not have a county record that documents property owner consent. So every heritage tree on private property must have consent before designation. That is the case, but in order for a person in the public to see that designation or that consent, they would have to go to city archives, pretty much. And that's true for about 105 private heritage trees. Starting in 2015, Urban Forestry instituted a new practice of recording that consent with the county, and it is then more public viewing. Having that gap of publicly accessible records at the county has caused some problems, some conflict in the past with new property owners buy a property with one of these heritage trees on it that don't have county records, and they were surprised. That's what they say. I didn't know was a heritage tree. When they were going through the title process for that property, it didn't come up. So we're trying to rectify that issue. And then, so right now the current status is we've got about 70% of heritage trees on private property that need county documentation. So what we've done so far to try to resolve this, is we've sent out an annual awareness letter. We've started doing that in 2024. So regardless of a current or new property owner, they get a letter every year. Hey, you've got a heritage tree. We've also put all these heritage trees are documented on portlandmaps.com. So even if they don't see it in county records, title record pool will probably look at this resource, the city property resource, and find it there. And then we're also having a new info page on our city website for these people. So actions and status so far. So I started sending out letters to these property owners, asking them to sign a form that I will then receive back and record with the county. Success, I have received at least 10 forms. I've gotten more since the publication of this slide set. So I've got about 12 now, ready to be recorded. And no one so far has requested delisting, which is great. However, that's still a lot of people that haven't responded. I expect to put in another secondary letter reminding people to send in forms. So the letter goes out with the form when it goes out. So all they have to do is sign it, get it notarized, and mail it back to me. And that's all instructed in the letter. So far, so good. People have been responding either with questions for clarification, or just requesting changes on the form to better accurately describe who's signing.
So 10 out of how many mailings?
92.
92.
So yes,
There's 92 left.
no.
92 total. What was the 105 you said earlier?
So 105 is the trees.
Yeah.
92 property owners. So some property owners may have a shared tree amongst themselves, and other property owners have multiple trees on their property.
So there's 80 that you haven't heard from?
About, yeah. And some people had bounced letters or they sent back forms that needed fixing. So I've gotten a mix. But yes, most have not responded. So this still leaves open the question of potential delistings. We're kind of opening up that conversation. Some property owners are happy to respond and sign a letter right away, which is helpful. Most don't respond at all. That's kind of what we expected. Hopefully more outreach will help aggregate more people responding. But we might encounter someone that wants to delist their tree for one reason or another. And the UFC has yet to have a consistent criteria to help evaluate those situations. And that is the responsibility of the UFC, of course, to hear those requests. So proposed ideas I've sent in the proposed criteria I sent to you. The real obvious ones are like the dead, dying, dangerous ones, right? And those are the technical descriptions in code that preserve public safety, remove hazards, etc. We also wanted to consider root impacts to structures. So this is like if a heritage tree is having roots that are affecting the foundations of a house. So even though the tree is happy and healthy, the house may next to it might not be. And then initial designation error. So that's been infrequent, but it has been a history of the program where trees were designated under errors such as ownership, species, and or other issues of designation that were since found to be false and had to be pulled back. So that recognizes that context here. Some reasons to decline delisting include like development plans and land value. So that's kind of the intention of the program is to preserve trees in the spot where they are. So these would not be valid reasons to consider delisting. For financial burden, it's kind of a really hard question to nail down. So I left a lot of room and opportunity for the UFC to provide some input here. So some reasons to maybe not consider delisting is they don't want to maintain it, right? So they bought a tree on a property, they knew it in advance, they had a large tree there. It's going to have maintenance inherently. And then the cost to protect it during development. So those might be complaints that they would wish to delist on those reasons. So these are predictable expected costs whenever they purchase a property. Potentially valid though would be if the maintenance has escalated. Large trees become old, they become just like people, like their maintenance costs escalate and can become extraordinary. So it's important to be responsive and respectful of that. Other could be infrastructure repair. So if it's damaging their foundation and it's ongoing and that giant root can't be rerouted or pruned, that would be an issue. Beyond typical costs or unsustainable. These would then be documented by an arborist report, either private arborist and or a city tree inspection report. No assistance or cost sharing available to preserve the tree, so subsidizing maintenance costs. And if their homeowner's insurance wouldn't cover liability. So these, sorry, going back. So the UFC must then define the threshold. How do we evaluate these reported costs and expenses and burdens that the property owner would provide and document and support with a arborist report with some sort of threshold to evaluate that. There's a couple ways to do it. It could be with evaluation of the tree. It could be the ongoing costs and limitations of the landowner. It could be, what else? Let's see. And then annual maintenance costs exceeding the cost of the appraisal, a fixed dollar amount. You could just have a ceiling. Or a percentage of property value. If the owner is in some sort of city-sponsored financial assistance program or other metric that I haven't provided an example here. So that's a discussion and decision for the UFC. Other open questions. So yes, I would suggest the UFC consider financial burden as a consideration, but with parameters and documentation. Also, yes, if it's dead, dying, dangerous, you need an arborist report to verify that. Mitigation maintenance reasonable, such as scope or frequency. Contractors available to do the work if it's a specialized task. Maintenance is stable or escalated. And then if designation is no longer appropriate. So this is another kind of vague one where the tree was designated properly in the past, but time has changed the form or there's new determinations about designation and the tree no longer meets those criteria anymore. So if a property owner requests because it doesn't meet the form, then that could be a consideration. So an example was 146, where the property owner requests designation because the tree was damaged in a storm. They wish to preserve the tree, but it's only got 20% of canopy on it, and they want to do canopy restoration, which would be hard to do while it's in the program, relatively speaking. So I want to turn it over to the chairs and UFC to give me considerations, ideas, and also a date when we can kind of, yes, we have a criteria we're happy to go forward with, and if we want to have more conversations outside the meeting.
So I wanted to point out, that was great, Sam, thank you. Y'all don't have to decide stuff today. On the slide, because this is a big deal. It's a lot of work. Sam put in a lot of work on it too, to advise you. But we are prepared to schedule time for you all to discuss more and decide later on.
Yes, to echo that, when we're planning, we knew 20 minutes would not be enough time to hear that presentation and make decisions. And we are only have like 3 minutes left on this. So yes, we don't have to decide today. It's just keeping that conversation going. But do folks have any thoughts or questions just to help us with this kind of our thinking on this?
No, you mind going back to the slide about, is it one more before that? It's like the viability section.
Viability.
Yeah, or sorry, validity. The part about a cost of protector and development being not valid, is that just referring to just like the cost of like coming up with like a tree protection plan and arbor? Okay,
Or it could even just be like, they can't develop within a certain
sure,
space of the
Okay.
tree, and that is protecting the tree.
okay. Yeah,
So,
'cause
yeah,
I feel like
it can
there's,
be all
I don't know
those.
how much of an overlap there is with code right there, but normally a tree that would be, you know, over 20 inches, which most heritage trees I would say are, would have already required the level of protection right there, so I don't know. That may be an area that we can discuss as far as some of the criteria. As far as what's valid and not for delisting.
Yeah, I felt like this financial burden piece might be where we would spend most of our time because it's the hardest, I think, to wrap our heads around. So, agreed.
One question about that. So certainly those of us who've been on the committee for a while are highly aware of one case, where this was a really big deal. But what is actually the experience of the program overall? How many people have said, I do not want this tree because the maintenance is just too high. It's one thing to kind of set up rules for a significant problem, right? Versus a once in a century.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So,
I would say it's not infrequent experience for the property owner. As the tree gets larger and older and starts to have more care needs, they start feeling that burden more. Probably less so for the smaller form trees. So when I do have conversations with property owners, depending on who they are, they will say, yeah, I wish the city has some sort of, subsidy to provide, and that makes sense, yeah. So for like the Overlook Oak, that was a substantial cost to the property owner. Impressively so. So yeah, for that case, and it was a beloved oak, they did not fight, they didn't, resist the need to remove it. They understood. But it was a big and expensive and timely cost to them.
This is, this is the oak on Overlook Terrace?
This is number 19. Is that,
Across from Beach Elementary?
yeah,
Oh, okay. Got it.
that was last year.
Oh, yeah, that kind of came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
so this second part of that, why wouldn't, if we're doing, some private maintenance at this point, and it's sort of part of the future vision, why wouldn't the heritage trees, especially ones that are not listed on deeds, for
Mhm.
example, come to the top of the list in terms of helping if the cost is past X or that type of thing? I just have to ask that question.
So I did share the contact information. So I've got my list of addresses and names. So I shared that information with the tree care and maintenance program lead. They have certain parameters about where they can do that work that might exclude some of these heritage trees. I'm not terribly familiar with the intricacies of that program, but they have priority areas as well, and income levels as well. So they are doing outreach to these property owners and asking them if they need assistance, but I don't know if every property owner would. Does that answer your question?
This, and kind of following up on that, this has
Yeah.
been a question I've had for years about this program, which is, to me, I think it's more likely that a more affluent homeowner is going to be part of the program because they have a space that can fit a tree like this and they're willing to take on those, And I don't know if everybody realizes when they sign on exactly what that might mean financially down the road when it comes to requirements for pruning and for care and all those things. But my thought has been for a long time, the answer would be to support homeowners who wish to like the city's, being able to recognize this is like a public good because this tree is providing all these services, and then we might see more of them in the higher need neighborhoods being designated. But I remember, Jen, when we brought this up before, saying like, we just don't have budget for that, because that would be like a really big program to fund, to manage, so. But I do think that would help make a more equitable program in the city. If the homeowners, I think more homeowners would opt in if they knew that they'd get assistance with some of those really expensive costs in the future.
Yeah, it's too bad Jen is left, because it'd be good to understand what is the magnitude of this compared to some of the other work that's being done and so forth, to kind of put it in context. And I understand there's now program rules that you have on each side of these different programs in urban forestry. But, going above that, that could be a topic of conversation, for the future.
Yeah, the focus for they call it the private property trees programs. This is the funding of private tree maintenance. Budget is so limited for that program. It really is. So they have to prioritize not just where and who they're serving, but like the situations. They've been focusing on people with like compliance cases who are gonna get a lien on their house if they don't prune this branch that is dangerous, and they can't afford that. So like, the prioritization, they really have to focus their efforts right now. And if we had more money, of course, this is one of the things we all know that we'd love to fund as a city. Cause these trees do benefit well beyond the borders of that property, but we just don't have the funding right now.
One thing I wanna note is that I don't think that we should be preemptively suggesting that trees should be delisted. And on the last slide, it seems like we're expecting it, but also kind of like preparing to just almost like, I don't know, putting the cart before the horse, because legally they are still heritage trees. We don't technically need to do anything. We're just trying to prepare ourselves for the fight that we think is gonna be coming. But it doesn't mean we need to like delist the trees we already have in July, August, here delisting requests. You haven't got any delisting requests, so I understand planning for it, but I feel like our default should be that trees cannot be delisted. And if people want to go down that route, then we can continue to work for it. But I think also with the financial burdens, with all these other things, the one case that you're talking about, Chair, is the Mississippi oak, where they said that they did not have the financial, or it was a financial burden to take care of the tree, which they'd had for 20 years. So it just became a financial burden, and many people in the community, tree care companies as well as nonprofits, gave them money to say, here is how much money we can give for you to do the treatment for the tree that was needed, because it wasn't dead, it wasn't dying, it wasn't dangerous. It was strictly, they didn't want this infestation of insects. So they refuse the money and then still claim that it's a financial burden. So that really, I don't think should be, it should be considered, where if they say anyone that it's a financial burden, every single other opportunity should be taken in order to solve their problems and keep the tree. Before they just say, no, it's a financial burden, it's too much, I'm not gonna even take the money that's offered. Because then you can just continually do what those property owners did, which was ultimately get the tree removed for other reasons. So I'm dubious whenever we say financial burden, because anyone can say it's a financial burden. Like, I think that is a really slippery slope to argue, because it's hard for us to argue back without sounding quite insensitive. And I was called very specifically insensitive and racist for saying things like that. So I just want to make sure that we are putting the city's trees in a high priority. It's why they're heritage trees in the first place. And making sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot, giving too many opportunities for people to take the let's remove the tree route. Because also, it's way more expensive to remove a tree. So the financial burden, I don't know, to me is a little bit laughable. I mean, you're a tree care company, bidder, you've done it before, Commissioner Sanchez. How much would it be to cut down a 6 foot or a 6 foot diameter elm on Mississippi? Is that more than $2,500?
Certainly, I mean, we just did a response on a elm in Goose Hollow that just lost a leader. And it was over $20,000 on just doing a limb removal based on the coordination that required the crane service, flagging, utility clearance, it's steel plate rentals, labor hours.
That to me says, you know, we definitely need some financial help and assistance for something like that. It wasn't even a heritage tree.
That one was.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yours that you did
Goose,
responsible.
the Goose Hollow elm over here, it's
Oh,
an
gotcha.
example, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
6 foot diameter, talking a week, you know.
Yeah.
Easily $50,000.
It's a lot of money. So a financial burden that is too low, like just the cost of removal is so high. Where if they can afford the cost of removal, why can't they afford the cost of treatment? Why can't they afford literally anything else? In that case, they could have, for the price that was estimated, they could have treated the tree for 10 years. So I really think that that's something that we should pay attention to and have a, I don't know, hold a firm line with, so to speak.
So I want to be respectful of time. I am happy to receive comments, but I think it would be good for us to, if there were people interested in like a subcommittee or small group, wanting to communicate with me after discussion with the UFC as a whole, so that I can help facilitate this forward. I want to, yes, you have time, but also not a lot of time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a lot of competing priorities, so I don't want to be mindful of that.
To repeat the last sentence you just said is what?
You have time, so like this project is expected to go forward for more time, but you're gonna find that those summertime potential delisting like you're right. We don't have any yet, but maybe. It's good to be ready before you need to, is my point. And I wanna be agile and supportive of that outside the UFC meeting so that we can.
Yeah, like I think you, as we heard from Casey, this brought up a lot. It was very contentious in this particular case. And so we may never hear one like that again, or we may. So I think that's the idea, is we need to be ready. That was part of why it was so contentious, was that it was sort of this novel situation we hadn't really, at least since I've been on the commission, we hadn't seen a case like that before. So I appreciate being proactive. And I love the idea of a committee working on this, because I think it's gonna be hard to get all the time in the meetings that it would take. I mean, clearly there's a lot to discuss with all of this. Like you had suggested some kind of documentation. What documentation would that be? Which addresses your concern about how do you determine when it's a burden to somebody? Because it is, I mean, people's lives are complex. It's not always really a simple answer, right? So, I wonder if there's folks who like, and maybe this is something we can loop back on. Do we need to decide in our meeting on a committee? Is that, or can we loop back via email? Trying to remember our process for that.
May I? You would still, the full commission at a public meeting, be deciding on your criteria. So I don't think you need to establish who will work on that outside of this room. Yeah, here.
So maybe we can follow up via email to see if they have capacity to, and then I'm guessing they can work with you.
Yeah, I also respond to
that,
the
yeah.
emails,
Okay.
and I can do, video chats and things like that. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, so our last item is the housing bonus alignment.
We might be separate. I'm gonna get out of the.
Thank you.
So shifting topics a little bit.
Welcome, Morgan area.
Yeah, thank you.
Offered to run this for me, but it's a good idea. No, we got it. All right, there we go. Hopefully that works. Okay. Are we good to just jump into it? Okay. Hi, I'm Ariel Kane. I'm an economic planner at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and I'm with Morgan Tracy, our senior planner at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Sorry, I've introduced you. We're going to talk about the housing bonus alignment project, to give some background, go through the scope of the project and our proposals and potential impacts of the project, and then next steps for you all and the project itself.
This project is about revising our housing bonuses that are in our current zoning code, so Title 33. And also we're aiming to fulfill goals that are outlined in our comprehensive plan and in the housing production strategy. Housing production strategy was adopted by council at the end of 2024, and it sort of outlines about 35 different strategies that we've said we'll do over the next 6 years in order to meet the needs for housing production that we have. And how to incentivize developers to help us meet that need. And so this is about that latter portion, incentivizing developers for that need. In the housing production strategy and the housing needs analysis, we specifically looked at what household needs are not being met right now and what we anticipate them to be in the future. So we know about 50% of our new housing will need to be affordable to 80% area median income, so that lower income affordability. We also know about 23% of our housing needs to be accessible for households that have members with disabilities, who have older adults in their home, or who have households that are larger or have children. And in some cases, all of the above together. We do know that we are not currently getting that need met through our current development patterns. And so this project is really focused on incentivizing those specific housing needs. And like I mentioned, it's about revising this zoning incentives that we have in our zoning code right now. So far in the project, we've been doing expert interviews, so interviews with developers and architects, but also with accessibility advocates, because accessible housing is something we don't often, or we're not as familiar with in our work. We've also been hosting a cross-bureau inter-bureau coordination team meeting. So folks from Prosper, Portland Housing Bureau, Portland Parks and Rec, PBOTS, Portland Permitting and Development. So a whole host of folks have been a part of that over the last year. We've also done a bunch of analysis, including pro forma financial feasibility testing for the prototypes. We also worked with an architect to help us sort of look at whether or not our proposals were actually feasible on the ground. And we're right now in this phase of public feedback. So we've got these draft proposals that we're engaging folks on so that the next iteration can be more refined. The scope of the project is also citywide, but it's exclusively those RM, so multi-dwelling and mixed-use zones. They're highlighted, they're collapsed and highlighted in blue here, just for ease of eyes. But the out-of-scope areas for this project are sort of grayed out, and those are Central City and certain plan district areas. Though Central City is not because Central City is not important, but because it has the sibling project sort of moving at the same time, the Central City Code Alignment Project, looking at some of the same sort of topics, but as it pertains to Central City. And then some of our plan district areas, they have their own bonuses that either exceed or are about the same or just very significantly from our base zones. So they're a bit out of the scope of this project. And then just so we're all on the same page, because not everybody's looking at the zoning code, I just wanted to talk about what is a zoning bonus. So we are referring to the currency of the zoning code only, not financial incentives. So it's additional development standards or allotment in exchange for a public benefit. So many jurisdictions use zoning bonuses and they deal in different development standards. In our zoning code, this is mostly done in 3 ways with additional floor area ratio. So that building square footage relative to the site size, more envelope, how tall the buildings are, so height, and building coverage, so the amount of land that can be covered by the development. And we have bonuses already. We have about 6 bonuses that are in our base zones, those RM and CM zones that I mentioned. 2 of them are not a part of this project. So inclusionary housing, it's undergoing as part of the HPS and also a regular commitment to recalibrate. It'll be doing its own recalibration cycle in the coming years, and a lot's already happening at the state level. So it's a little too big for the scope of this project. The other is the affordable commercial bonus. It's exclusively dealing with affordable commercial space and not a housing bonus. So it's also sort of out for this project. The other 4 are mostly what we're looking at. So right now we have these 4 that we are revising. These are the current status of these bonuses. The deeper housing affordability incentivizes those lower income households. So when a development has 50% affordable units, and depending on if it's a ownership model or if it's a rental model, the affordability differs, but it requires an affordability covenant. This is the most used bonus right now and mostly used by affordable developers. Visitable bonus is for units that meet our lowest level of accessibility outlined in the zoning code. So someone who has a mobility disability can enter a home, can use the bathroom on the first floor of the home, but they likely can't live there comfortably without significant modification. So they can visit, they can't live. Not a truly accessible home, but it's also not available right now to most multi-dwelling projects. So most apartment buildings of a certain scale have a requirement for a higher level of accessibility. So it sort of renders this bonus not particularly useful to them. The 3-bedroom bonus is also a bit of an accessible bonus. It has an affordability covenant attached to it for 10 years. And the units, 50% of the units must have 3 or more bedrooms. So if you have 6 units, at least 3 of those units need to have 3 bedrooms in them. Lastly, the plan development bonus is a sort of small master plan site bonus. It has design requirements. It's available only in our commercial mixed use zones right now. It's also relegated to big lots, so lots that are 2 acres or more. We have about 50 of those in Portland, so it's not widely usable at the moment either. Of these bonuses, only the deeper affordable bonus currently gets all 3 bonus incentive types, so that FAR, height, and coverage. Everything else is restricted to just getting FAR bonus, or in the plan development case, FAR and height. There's been no documented use since visible bonus was adopted. And the 3-bedroom and plan development bonus have only been used a couple of times since it's been adopted. So prompting that need for review and refinement and deeper analysis. And so the analysis we've conducted, we're not going to subject you all to that. It's available in the documents we've shared, but Morgan will take us through the proposals that have come from that analysis.
So we will subject you to that. The proposed changes. The following slides are going to go in a little more detail. But just to summarize, the 4 key proposals of this project are expanding where the bonuses are available. So making the same types of bonuses available in both the multi-dwelling and the mixed-use commercial zones. Second is looking at increasing the capacity to earn those bonuses. So right now they sort of compete with one another. You can only earn 1 or 2 potentially, but not multiple types of bonuses. Third, we're looking at making the bonuses more feasible to achieve by right-sizing the requirements and the public benefit we're asking for in return. And the fourth is a sort of grab bag of other fine-tuning changes to make the code easier to implement. So the first proposal, pretty straightforward, just expanding the bonuses to apply in more zones. So except for that commercial affordable bonus, which is really limited to commercial uses, this proposal ensures the same types of housing bonuses that are available in the multi-dwelling zones are available in the mixed-use zones and vice versa. For example, by expanding that deeper affordability bonus, which is only in the multi-dwelling zones currently, this allows nonprofit housing providers to leverage their development sites in those mixed-use commercial zones. The other bonuses are likewise being expanded to apply to both sets of zones because accessible, affordable, and family-sized housing is needed throughout all of these areas. The second proposal is intended to create more room so that multiple bonuses can stack on each other to deliver more of the kinds of units that Portlanders need. For example, in the current code, you can either obtain a bonus for inclusionary housing or for providing a deeper affordable unit or for a 3-bedroom and potentially a visitable unit, but you wouldn't get a bonus for doing all of those things together. So the proposal would allow the bonuses to be stacked on each other, which, as I mentioned, creates incentives for builders to produce multiple types of needed housing in the same project. Let's go to this. Our third proposal looks at balancing the public benefit, that is the bonus requirements, with the proposed incentives, such as extra floor area, height, or coverage for each of those bonuses. And to make those adjustments, we looked at the previous use of the bonuses, analysis conducted with our consultant, and feedback gathered from additional city experts and interviews with developers and advocates. We looked at, for example, the deeper affordability bonus that had a fairly regular use. So we were not looking at making much in the way of changes to those requirements. However, as Ariel mentioned, the accessible bonus currently is the visitable standard, which is the lower level of accessibility for folks with mobility requirements. So the proposed accessibility bonus upgrades that accessibility feature and uses a more industry-wide accepted type A accessibility standard. We're still looking at requiring that 25% of the units meet that type A level, which the building code by default only requires 2% of the units to meet that standard. And this also allows those larger projects, the apartments and condominiums, to use that bonus as well. The multi-bedroom bonus currently has a very high 50% of the units required to be 3 bedrooms and larger. We saw a couple projects use that bonus. They were smaller scale townhouse projects. Larger type development, that's really tough to meet. So we're reducing that threshold to 25% and creating an option for 2 or 3 bedroom units. And also removing the affordability restriction and replacing it with a cap on the unit size as a market-driven way to address those price levels. So basically avoiding large, luxurious luxury or penthouse units. This is easier to administer and removes the need for the restrictive covenants. The current plan development bonus is only applicable, as Ariel mentioned, in some of our mixed-use zones and only on those 2-acre sites. It requires these 4 elements of inclusionary housing, so affordable units, a public plaza, at least 15% of the site size, increased energy efficiency for the building, and an additional level of design review. The proposed development bonus would expand that bonus to be available in the multi-dwelling zones and reduces the site size threshold to 40,000 square feet, so roughly in 1 acre. That increases the eligible sites to about 250. The same types of elements would still be required, but we've added a 2-tier system in the building heights to reflect those smaller site sizes. And we've added an incentive to allow taller building heights when buildings are built using innovative mass timber construction. So this final proposal includes several fine-tuning revisions to the code in order to make the bonuses work better. There's a bit of a loophole of sorts that if you have a site with multiple buildings and none of the buildings are over 20 units each, inclusionary housing is not required. That's a limitation in the state law. We can't do anything about that, but we've added a prioritization so that you have, in those situations, you would have to use the inclusionary housing bonus before you were able to unlock the other bonuses on a site like that. So it just kind of helps close that loophole. We're looking at deleting the senior and disabled high density housing chapter because it has many of the same types of bonuses and incentives, which we are now incorporating in the base zones. So they'll be more widely available. We are proposing that in the higher density multi-dwelling zones, the RM3 and RM4 zones, it was the increased setback. So for a buildings over 55 feet tall, the setback increases from 5 feet in the side and the rear to 10 feet. And we found that had a large impact, more of an impact than building coverage on how many units could be built on a floor. So projects in those zones that earn bonus height will have the standard 5-foot setback applied. Similarly, step down heights can impact how many units can be built on a floor. So this is cases where you have a site across the street from your project. That site across the street is a lower intensity zone, like a single family zone. The step down height limits the amount of building height in the first 15 to 25 feet of the project site. That creates some complications, adds construction cost. So in cases, again, where you're earning those bonuses for increased height, the step down requirement would not be applied on the street side. It would still continue to apply to the abutting lots side. So if you have a single family home behind you, you still have to do that transition. We have an allowance that lets indoor common area substitute for outdoor area. That's a current allowance. But we found that unlike the outdoor areas, there are no dimensional requirements for those indoor areas. And through our modeling, we found even our architect was kind of squeezing these indoor areas into strange configurations. And so that prompted us to add some dimensional standards for those. to make them ensure that they remain usable. We're defining bedrooms because it's a key component of our multi-bedroom bonus. And that ensures the units are constructed with true bedrooms and not lofts or mezzanines. And finally, we've added language that clarifies this, the bonus in the CM2 zone is available in this Center's Main Street overlay. Okay, so kind of bringing it back to the commission. So we added this slide to highlight some of the items and issues this commission may be interested. We think it's important to note some of the things that are not changing. So the location and extent of the base zones. This is not a mapping project. We're not changing the base zones. This is simply what's available in terms of additional entitlement for projects building in the existing base zones. Not changing tree planting, landscaping, or other green space requirements. Those will continue to apply. There's a floor area transfer tool for sites that preserve 12-inch and larger trees in the multi-dwelling zones. Ranges from being able to transfer 1,000 to 16,000 square feet based on the size of the tree and the zone it's located in. That's remaining. And since it came up today, we're not touching the heritage tree program. But we also recognize that some of these bonuses may have an impact on achievable tree canopy. And this is largely expressed in terms of reduced setbacks. So I mentioned the RM3, RM4 zones and reducing from 10 feet to 5 feet for those taller buildings. And increased building coverage, which is primarily an issue or more prominent in the lower scale multi-dwelling zones, the RM1 and RM2 zones, where we're going from 50 and 60%. Current bonuses allow you to go to 60 and 70%. The proposal allow you to go to 70 and 80% in those zones. There are increases in allowable floor area and height, but these don't directly affect space for trees. Just sort of ancillary because it's kind of related. I mentioned the height incentive under the plan development bonus when projects are using that mass timber construction. Some of the comments we've heard so far from our bureau partners in BES, their issues or concerns largely focus around stormwater management. So again, similar kind of concern about open space. There is a minimum outdoor area requirement that exists. It's a 20 by 20 foot dimension, but as I mentioned, that can be substituted for indoor area or it can be divvied up into individual balcony areas. So from BES's perspective, the most cost-effective way to deal with stormwater in areas that can support it is in ground infiltration or dry wells. And to do that, there's space required around that dry well, typically a 15 by 15 foot space. And if we're talking about 5 foot setbacks around a perimeter of a building, that doesn't leave adequate space for that. So their concern is about pushing those developments into higher cost type solutions. From our folks in PPR and Forestry, heard general support for bonusing height in terms of ways to enact or allow that additional floor area to be utilized. We heard suggestions for bonuses for tree preservation. I think the others here are really about maintaining space for trees. So consider alternatives for the setback reduction and maybe perhaps related to the site width or depth and other constraints that are relevant to those dimensional issues. We've heard actually on both sides of this outdoor area requirement, the support for indoor community areas as well as outdoor areas. With the increased building coverage, it may be more difficult to meet the tree density requirements on site. Potentially with the smaller spaces that are available, you may force applicants into a more fee in lieu kind of situation. And similarly, the 85% building coverage on small lots may impact tree preservation requirements. When you go above 85% or at 85% or above, tree preservation doesn't apply. And if you're just below it, you really don't have a whole lot of space to work around the tree. So that makes it harder to retain trees. So those are the comments we've heard.
Just before we wrap up, just wanted to briefly showcase some of what this might look like on the ground because we're talking lots of numbers. But through working with a consultant, we looked at how these proposals might impact development choice and feasibility in our 4 most common zones in our buildable lands inventory. So our buildable lands inventory documents sites that are most likely to redevelop and or are vacant. And so those are RM1, RM2, CM2, and CM3. So our lowest density RM zones, multi-dwelling zones, are lowest density mixed use zones as well. In general, we also mostly have 5,000 square foot and 10,000 square foot sites in those, so not very big sites. On the screen, you can see on the left-hand side, this is our existing base zone, what a developer might do today. It's what's allowed. You could get a 5-story building on I believe this is a 10,000 square foot site in this commercial mixed use area. Probably you're going to have some tuck under parking, and you can see there's a chunk of green that's the required outdoor area. So in that building, you probably have 40-ish units. 8 are probably 2 bedrooms. They're probably doing the bare minimum for inclusionary housing for affordable units. So that'd be about 5 affordable units. And the bare minimum for the accessible building code units, which is 2% max, or minimum, which is 1 unit for this type of building. As you move further across the screen, this is adding in our proposed bonuses. So if you add in the multi-bedroom bonus, a developer might be able to get another full floor out of it, still probably doing that tuck under parking. You get an increase of almost double the 2-bedroom units, just 1 more affordable, 1 more accessible unit. Add in the accessible bonus on the far right, then you're getting not quite a full floor probably, but that was a development choice. So, there's still some room for what this could look like. But you are significantly increasing the amount of accessible units with the bonus. You're jumping from 43 units up to 60 units, 16 of which will be accessible, and 15 of which will have 2 or more bedrooms. So those are the outcomes we're hoping for, and it seems possible given what we've worked on with the consultant. In terms of like recent development that sort of matches the sort of scale of those buildings, these are bigger lot sizes because we're seeing development on bigger lot sizes right now. But Modera Woodstock, that's a CM2 development that was recently completed. It's 5 stories. So we learned the Doc 59 are sort of increasing that scale in 1 story. I believe those are EX zones right now, but those are sort of what we might expect in terms of the bonus proposal changes on those lots. Just in terms of next steps and the process we're in right now, we're coming to the end of our discussion draft phase. We're closing public comment on March 23rd. That's next Monday. Now is a really great time. We've gotten to go to a bunch of our advisory groups and also community group and advocacy meetings. Still processing comments. This iteration of the draft is you're going to be giving comments directly to staff, and staff will take these comments and integrate them into our proposed draft. There's more public comment opportunity as we get to planning commission and city council, of course, but those will be testimony for hearings, so less directly to staff. So this is a really great time to give us feedback and make sure we're sort of having the best proposal going to planning commission and city council. And just timeline, as I mentioned, where this comment period will end on March 23rd. Planning Commission is likely hitting this summer, with council aspirationally in the fall or winter, but it's a big unknown. We've shared documents and things like that, but if you want, those are the links.
Does that mean that we only have until the 23rd to comment as this council or the commission?
Yeah, I was gonna mention that. So obviously that's not possible. So we're gonna welcome you as individuals to comment on the map app. The commission may have further discussions. I think given the challenge of that time frame, you're probably looking at commenting or testifying to the planning commission on the proposed draft, which will have some refinements from what we presented here versus the discussion draft, but largely the elements in the proposal very similar.
Yeah, we tried to get on an earlier agenda, but you guys are very busy. And so, yeah, we can also come back if needed before we go through the proposed draft phase, or not before the proposed draft phase, but during the proposed draft phase, so that you can get a opportunity to look at the changes that we're making and get briefed on it too. And so that would be, I think we'd be looking at something in June if that's possible.
Does anyone have anything to say?
Say something. So, I mean, I think supporting with the feedback that you've gotten from urban forestry, that these are communities that generally have less access to green space, have less access to the protective nature of tree canopy. And so, highly supportive of doing whatever we can to incent preserving and expanding that. I know it's a real challenge. These are small lots. Yeah, I'd be interested in what that could look like from your experience, and what would be effective.
Like I couldn't not see that all of those housing projects, like you can't see any trees.
Yeah, those
I'm
big
guessing
scale.
there's some plantings, it's just they're not even visible, which is that's something I know if like Megan Vandermark's not on our commission anymore, but she would always bring that up, like we gotta see the trees. But it is noteworthy that they're
Yeah, I know we haven't had a lot of development lately, so I will just say it's been hard to find pictures of development to like show you guys, but yeah, in those larger scale CM2 sort of developments, yeah, there probably are less trees going in, but things like this are lower density zones, of course, they're able to do a little bit more preservation and
Those are all street trees and trees on adjacent
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I was gonna mention, I don't know if I heard Jen mention the furnishing zone. I don't know what the workaround that might be, but I think there's sort of as we intensify development on these sites, there's kind of a greater reliance on what happens in the right of way in terms of your tree canopy. And acknowledge we can't rely on right of way trees to cover our canopy needs, but in these, these are higher intensity zones. They represent about, both of those zones together, mixed use and multi-dwelling, represent about 15% of the city's area. So there are some trade-offs to be considered. I don't want to obscure that fact.
Thanks very much for your presentation. I really appreciate you guys putting in the work for that. Candidly, I don't think anything that you showed will actually impact trees. I think it'll be negatively impacting the trees on site. And I was an inspector working in development for the city for 5 years, so I know it pretty well historically. One of the biggest issues, reducing the setback. It doesn't matter if you go from 10 to 5, anything less than 10 or 10 at all, means that you're planting around the outside of the lot, right? Now, what is the rule with tree removal, Jen, on private property within 10 feet of a building?
By right.
You can remove that tree. So after Title 33, once the size of the tree gets to 12 inches, it then transfers from the Title 33 management to Title 11, at which point the property owner can say, we'd like to remove this tree. By right, we as the city cannot say no. So this tree that was required 10 years ago or 20 years ago through this project is now just a shoe-in for removal. And that's if the tree techs do the research to know that the building was done and all this kind of stuff. So we're never setting ourselves up for success by having the smaller setbacks without having a requirement that that tree that's being planted next to this building, yes, it's within 10 feet, but it's not allowed to be removed in perpetuity unless it's dead, dying, or dangerous. So if we can add something that fixes that loophole between Title 11 and Title 33, I think that the feasibility of keeping that tree on site will actually work. Otherwise, it's just not. It's just going to be removed. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration. The other thing that I think should be considered is the space for a tree. There's one instance on Mallory Avenue and Going Street in Northeast Portland where there was a very large white fir. It's the biggest in the city, should have been a heritage tree, but of course they didn't want it. I got in a lot of trouble telling the developers years ago, you don't have to develop, and they didn't. They waited till I quit the city and then they developed. I'm just kidding. They didn't do this. But it was removed, and it was right on the corner, an extremely good spot for a tree in terms of development on site. Yet it was not removed, and there's no incentives, or it was not retained because there are no incentives to say, if you keep enough space for this tree, and you have an arborist say, yes, if we come out X amount and we save this little corner of the property, you can adjust everything else because on site for certain densities, there's not only a setback requirement, but you have to be close enough to the street as well, right? So you can't just develop one half of the property. You have to meet a certain size requirement. Is that correct?
There are maximum setbacks in certain
Yeah.
cases.
So I think that if there is an ability to have more flexibility in that maximum setback, then if there is an incentive, a big incentive, not just a big stick to say, don't remove this tree, but an incentive that says, if you do keep this tree on site, then you can have a bigger setback away from the tree and you can get a little taller, because that's really what is required to save trees on site. Otherwise, there's not really going to be any good option. Secondly, rather finally, you noted that the right-of-way trees are often the ones that are most helpful because everything on site often is either not there or ends up getting removed. If we're doing that, then I think the development and the commission, the design commission in particular, needs to pay attention to the trees that are in the right of way. They're not required to be shown on site because the design commission, of course, they're not looking at the right of way. They're looking for the on-site trees. So when they see these nice renderings, they see these big, beautiful trees that either exist or are going to be planted that are not actually there or don't look like that if they are there. And then when urban forestry comes in, who only deals with the right of way, we say there's a tree here. You can't build your whatever you want to build in this location because of a tree. But the design commission already said, no, you can do that. Now they can't go back. And now we find ourselves kind of two different institutions are saying two different things because they're looking at two different things. So I think that the right of way trees, if you want to say that that is going to be the most impactful trees next to these buildings, then they need to be considered right from the very get-go in the design commission's work, so that they can say, great, don't put a driveway there, don't put a light there, don't put your access vault for electricity there, because that's where the tree is. So I think that is extremely important. If we don't have room on site, then it has to be a highlighted, very particular aspect of the design, the street trees. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
One question for you, because I
Yeah.
didn't catch it. Mallory and
Going northeast. Yeah, it was a large white oak, I'm sorry, not white oak, white fir. It was on the northeast corner, and now it is several little townhouses.
Gotcha. Thanks for that.
Back on the incentives for like creating creative spaces in the right of way. I mean, I assume a lot of these places are rebuilding the sidewalks and whatnot when they're doing that major construction. And so, there's some pilots going on where you kind of do bump outs, things like that for planting zones. So there was an incentive for that, could be a huge opportunity for
Yeah.
low income housing.
Appreciate that. I'm actually meeting with the staff from Peabot in the next couple of weeks to talk about, not related to this project, but sort of in the related conversation, because it comes up frequently. And developers are also asking to reduce their right-of-way dedication because their buildings are pushing up against they're trying to maximize the site, so they don't want to dedicate. And when they don't dedicate, they don't create enough space in the right-of-way to allow for tree planting. So there's a multiple kind of feedback. Appreciate it.
Thanks, you all. I think we're a little over time, so we'll end for today, but yeah, we appreciate hearing about this, and I think hopefully we can hear more.
Yes.
And talk about, I know commissioners, if you feel so moved to provide comments, since it's such a tight timeline.
I heard Ariel suggest that June, perhaps, they could return
Yes,
discussion, so
that'd be great.
noted in our tracking of agenda. See.
Yeah, good to see you.
Thank you. Commissioner. Take care.